Janek Ambros, you co-wrote and directed one of the most unique films I've seen in years. It's called MONDO Hollywoodland, and it's now available to rent or own on Amazon. And I'm going to go on a limb and say it's available to own on Amazon because, damn, this is, I said it's a unique movie, but it really is about kind of everything. It's a fifth dimensional traveler who winds up in Hollywood following a mushrooms dealer around town and kind of trying to figure out the secret of what is Mondo. Now, that could mean a lot of things, and it's certainly a journey for the audience to to go on. But I want to start at the very beginning. Who are you? How did you get into this crazy business and end up making a movie about possibly the ultimate movie about this crazy business called entertainment?
Yeah, so I'm one of those kind of people who was making like home video movies when I was really young. So like, 7, 8, just like playing around, like stop motion, all that kind of stuff, right? But ultimately, it was like when I was a teenager, when I was really getting into movies, just kind of, I had like one summer where I just like hit all of the kind of typical like good movies, like Lawrence of Arabia, just these kind of like massive lists of movies. And then so I kind of knew I wanted to do that. My cousins were pretty instrumental in this because they gave me like a list. This is when I was really young, of like Goodfellas, a lot of Scorsese films, a lot of gangster films, like Menace to Society, Juice, like a lot of these like cool, like just awesome movies. So yeah, so I kind of started I kind of knew I wanted to do film, but it was always just kind of like I don't know, this little bit of this like, probably some people saw it as like some weird, like, oh, Janek has some weird pipe dream about, going to Hollywood and making movies. And grew up in Albany, New York. So I kind of learned though through just my surroundings that like money makes the world go around. So I kind of went into, I didn't go to film school for undergrad. I kind of like didn't get the best grades because I was mostly just like screwing around watching movies and stuff like that. But I went to school and got a degree in economics. So I did like finance for a bit, but always with the kind of knowledge knowing that, oh, this is kind of my roundabout way to like get into movies. I don't know. I was like, I'll figure it out somehow. So I eventually did move out there with kind of some of the economic finance background, and that kind of helped me create my own company when I was right when I moved to LA when I was like 22, which is the company I have now, which also does financing and stuff. So that was kind of my way in. I kind of was like, okay, well, I'll start a company and then kind of like put myself in charge of making movies. And it kind of, to some degree, it worked in some levels, but like, yeah, so that's kind of how I did it. Is like, it was just more like, I always knew I wanted to do it, but I studied different things. I kind of also figured if I studied different like history, economics, politics, because most of my films are all very, very political, and I'm just like entrenched in politics and all that kind of stuff. And my first film was a documentary on the War on Terror. A lot of my early, more experimental shorts were more political. The stuff I executive produced is usually political. So I learned a lot about things that I can make movies about, and then kind of got into it that way. And then, of course, this movie is like very much about Hollywood or whatever. But like, yeah, so that was kind of my roundabout way to getting into the film industry.
So when did you move out to LA? What timeline are we
That was
talking here?
2012.
2012. So you didn't have a plan when you moved out to LA. You just kind of went out there with an economics degree and set up shop. This was, right as the economy was not doing great. So this is kind of a doubly bold move.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody there, so that was like interesting. So that was like, but I like, it was like the Willie Loman with like Death of a Salesman. I would just cold call people and shit. It was nuts. Like I really like. I was actually had met with a producer yesterday just for like drinks, and it was just funny talking about like I think I emailed him when I was like 22, like, hi, my name is Janek. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but like, maybe you can like, so like, it's funny. I talk to people now, like people at like CIA or whatever, and I'll like I'll be like, oh shit, I probably emailed them when I was like 23, like pitching them some random shitty screenplay I wrote. You know what I mean? So like, I'll always go back and look and like see if I emailed this person 10 years ago. But yeah, so I kind of just like cold called people and like emailed blasted people and just try to like claw my way in that way.
So how did that, well, I know how it would work, but how did it work? How effective was it as far as getting people to even talk to you, or did you just get kind of ghosted, or did people give you advice? Like, how did that work out?
Oh, it was cool. Like, there's a great, Brian Grazer, the producer.
Yeah, yeah. Ron Howard's partner, right?
Yeah, he produced the actually produced he wrote a book called A Curious Mind. I actually didn't learn about the book till later, but it was kind of reinforced some of what I did. So what his book is basically is like he got an office at Paramount when he was young, and he used that office to be like, hey, I need like 5 minutes of your time, and he just did that for years, and he cultivated a lot of relationships that way. Though he says it was like more of like there wasn't any like ulterior motive to like, but I don't know. But like he would reach out to people in the industry to like talk to them and cultivate relationships. I did something similar. I like one example, which is like kind of funny. And like my hero has always been Coppola, because he was kind of half director, half kind of this business guy, you know, whatever. Because he'd be this big producer, and of course, he's like the greatest director ever, right? One of the best, right? So his lawyers, this guy Barry Hirsch, and it's funny. He's actually mentioned in the Hearts of Darkness documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in one scene, Coppola is like screaming about Martin Sheen, and he mentions Barry Hirsch's name. So it's like when I was really young, I emailed him a lot, and I would be like, probably really annoying. I was like, hey, do you have like, can I talk to Mr. Coppola? And he was like, no, like leave me alone. Like he's like a high powered lawyer who's like, what the fuck is this? But eventually he like put me in contact with his assistant, and then eventually I got to talk to Coppola for like 2 hours on the phone. So
Wow.
like it was effective in that way. I got a lot of advice. There's a lot of advice actually I used for this film. Like but also there was some really people that it turned into like actual material, like collaborations. Like Barbara DeFina is Martin Scorsese's producer for years. She produced Goodfellas, Casino, and that was one person I reached out to after I made something, though. I would make these little films for like very little money. And then I would reach out to them and say, hey, do you like this? Because I felt like if I reached out to some of these people without having anything, it would be just like, what do you want me to do? You know what I mean? So like it was actually really effective. And people I think are very, you just have to be, I think if anybody were to think about doing this, if someone's watching this, like it's just about personalizing it, not being full of shit, like really reaching out to people that like did inspire you, and kind of like a focus on what you would compliment them on, or what you essentially what kind of want from them. It's like it's just more authentic, and then I think people will eventually kind of literally respond back, and maybe you can build relationships that way. So I think it was kind of effective.
Well, I mean, that's encouraging, I imagine, because you hear about Hollywood, you hear, one of two things. The rich and famous, they talk about making movies and everybody's a family and it's all great. And then you hear about the people who come from a bus come on a bus from Idaho, and they just end up never making it because everybody's cruel and selfish and out for themselves. It sounds like you've had, kind of a dream experience. I mean, I imagine not all the interactions were that positive and
No,
magical,
I
getting
mean,
to talk to Coppola.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of just obviously people who didn't respond, and especially I think people were a little bit more rude back then too. I think people are more careful these days to kind of just be like, like email. I would email like agents. They'd be like, "Fuck off," like, you don't see that I think as much anymore. But no, look, I don't want to be like, "Oh, I came out here," because like, there's nothing more annoying than like when somebody's like, "Oh, I moved to Hollywood and started with nothing." Like, I didn't start from nothing. I had a degree, like I was very fortunate to kind of, so it's like, I think I had a lot of things kind of go my way, in terms of like that aspect of it. So I don't know.
So, kind of curious, what did your economics degree, aside from helping to set up a company, I imagine, and be smart with the money, once it started coming in, what did you learn? Well, hopefully, what did you
I'm
learn
still
in?
learning a lot of that.
Well,
Yeah.
but like going through that program and getting your degree, did that help you at all for dealing with Hollywood?
Yeah, I think it made me a little bit more like cynical about what bottom line it was for like how to make a movie. Why would anybody make a movie? That this is ultimately a business. I think that's an important thing to kind of have in the back of your mind as you're trying to make something that's outside the box. Even if you're trying to make something totally crazy and psychedelic or like really politically edgy, is just kind of having that at least in the back of your mind that, you know, not like doing it just for that, like serving that industrial kind of like thing that this business is, but just having it in the back of your mind. So when you speak to somebody, it's a little bit more like you're able to like maybe get a little bit of money or do it like that. So, I mean, now I've kind of veered a little bit more into like film finance and stuff, but back when I was originally starting, it was very helpful. And then like one of my first movies is like a short film. It was about the '08 about the housing crisis, and it was about like a Wall Street broker kind of dissecting every single economic thing through his like in his head with a few minutes left till like the market closed on one of those days where like Lehman Brothers was collapsing.
Yeah.
This was like in 2012 I made it. And like, so literally like the actual substance of what I learned in economics is something I use too. It's not just the business. Like I've been developing a movie about FDR Secretary of Labor, more of a bigger budget thing that I would probably just be a writer on and dish off to maybe someone who's a little bit more of a veteran director. So that like I use a lot of economics and politics in the work. So it's not just like, oh, how can it help me make the business? It's like material, you know, it's like doing research. Because people say like, oh, write what you know, but it's like, I think that can be sometimes a little bit like dangerous because it's like, you should try to expand your mind and learn about other things. Because otherwise you just have a bunch of movies that are about like couples in Brooklyn or Silver Lake. You know what I mean? And it's just like, fuck, Jesus Christ. So like, I think you should challenge yourself to really learn and read and educate yourself on stuff that's interesting or unique so you can implement it into your work, you know? So and people's learn others' life experiences that's not your own. Like that's really important, you know. And I think especially for film, that's like a medium about like the empathy machine that, you know, Ebert talks about, you know.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you got your degree in economics. Did you end up going to film school? Did you study film while you were in, you know, school, any kind of a program or?
Yeah. So I kind of did this like more of a conservatory while I started my company, and that was like helpful. It was like, yeah, it was good. It was like I had some really good teachers there who kind of worked in the business and stuff like that. So that was really helpful.
There's an acting class segment in the Dreamers chapter of Mondo Hollywoodland. I wonder, now acting and directing are two different, you know, disciplines, especially when you're learning. But was any of the class material in the movie drawn from your experience in class? Did you have any crazy angry teachers?
No, that was actually Blim, you know, the producer, co-writer, star, production designer who really made this movie with me through and through. He was that was, I think, I don't want to speak for him, but that means that's something he really wrote. And I think not only I'm pretty sure the teacher is the teacher. So he flew in the teacher that he had to play that guy, which was probably, this was pretty wild. I don't know if it's like based off what he was like in real life, but that would be something for more for Chris to answer because that was something he focused on. But yeah, I think he went to school, I think for more acting and theater. So that wasn't, no, I only took a few acting classes when I was in LA, and they really scared me. I wasn't a fan. There's a lot of like, you know, like the first second you go in, it's like, okay, now like start dancing. And I was like, I have to go, you know, like I think I could do that now and not feel too weird. But I remember I went with this actor who I produced a movie with. And she was like, you should come. And it was just horrifying to me. I don't know. It was scary.
So let's talk a bit about the collaboration that went into making Mondo Hollywoodland. You mentioned, you know, Chris Blim, and there was a third writer on the movie. Marcus Hart. Yeah. So how did you collaborate to make this picture? It sounds like from what you were saying, Chris brought more of an autobiographical tinge to that acting portion. Did you kind of divvy up the three main sections and then someone wrote the bookends or?
Yeah, no, I would say like that wouldn't be like yeah, that was something he worked on. Like we worked on the whole thing. So I kind of how it all started. I'll kind of maybe get into that. It's like so me and Marcus. This is like 2014. Marcus is a huge Paul Thomas Anderson fan. Like it's huge, right? Who isn't? But like he's more than normal of a fan. And he was like, there is a screening of Mondo Hollywood, which is the 1967 film, or some weird film that Paul Thomas Anderson is presenting. So I basically, me and him went to the screening, though there's this kind of a side story that I'm not going to fully get into where I kind of missed the screening, but whatever. It's maybe a different story for a different day. So anyway, Paul Thomas Anderson presented this film, played it. I later watched it on YouTube because I didn't go to the screening. And then we were like, it was like, what a cool, like crazy psychedelic film. So I was like, oh, what if we did a VR version of like Hollywood? And we did this like, because I got this VR camera and that was like a new thing. And I was like into it, but after a while I was like, this isn't like a filmmaker. This isn't movies. Like this is a different thing. Like VR is just a different thing than movies. It's cool. I love it. There's a lot of artistry in it. I know people who are into it, but not my thing. So at first it was just more like documentary thing, and it was kind of like I don't know. It was just kind of this narration that goes over like more of a cinema verite thing, kind of more like the original one. But the original one was so great, and this one was trying to maybe I don't know. It just wasn't working. So I met Chris, and I was like, hey, I kind of am like half working this, trying to make this movie thing, but it's like what if we made it a narrative together? So and then Chris came on board, and kind of the trio was made. And then we went for a way more narrative style. And so, and Blim is very like creative and imaginative and like, and just like able to really kind of do abstracts and like is very goofy and funny. So that's when we all kind of like were able to like hash out the framework of the screenplay. And then, Chris and I would kind of work on like the comedy stuff and like do like the kind of vignettes. And then we kind of just wrote all the way up until the end of the edit. Like the script would always be changing. It was a wild process with that.
It sounds like it. I mean, I didn't quite know what to expect. I put the movie on. It is very, I guess montage driven in the beginning. With you're not quite. It's hard to get oriented in the film. There's a lot of bright colors and random scenery. A lot of footage that I didn't expect to see. Like you've got some shots from like Godfather and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And my first question in my head while I was watching was, how'd you get the rights to have that? Or is that sort of a something is snuck?
Fair use. It's fair use.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of so like my first movie, Imminent Threat, was a doc on the War on Terror, and I didn't have any money, so I interviewed like 6 people and then interspliced it with just rip stuff off YouTube of like stock footage, CNN footage, interviews. And then you just, I put it together and I was like, well, I don't know if anybody can watch it. And then a fair use lawyer was like, yeah, you can, as long as you're saying something, like there's legal basis for being able to express and say things with fair use. I'm gonna get too much into it, but I guess so a lot of that stuff is just like if something's happening and you're not portraying it in a wrong way, then it's like you're fine to use it. Like it's like a car or something. Like if you're just driving a car, then like you'll be fine to use it. It's if you twist it into something else and portray that thing in a bad way. You know what I mean?
I guess that makes sense because in the context, and they're very quick shots, but you're sort of discussing the history of Hollywood and showing, showcasing a couple of Hollywood movies.
Exactly. You have to kind of be, yes, sorry to interrupt, but that's exactly the thing. You have to it has to be in tandem with a point.
Yeah. Well, we see the same thing kind of on YouTube as well. You can't just, repost a trailer for a Marvel movie. If you want to do that, you can talk about it. You can kind of give it some extra context. So you kind of like reporting on it. Yeah. No, that's cool. But what I was getting at was once the movie kind of settles in after the first, few minutes and we get into this narrative conceit of the fifth dimensional traveler talking to Boyle, the mushroom dealer, played by Chris Blim. Uh, Boyle asserts that there are sort of three tiers in this weird landscape of titans, weirdos, and dreamers. And then we go into these three sort of stories that become interconnected throughout the film. What struck me, particularly towards the last section with the dreamers, and I should say there's sort of a fourth part where everything really does come together into this bizarre sort of heist, which I won't really get into. But there's an audacity and a savage, pointed humor that frankly you just don't see much anymore, because I don't think people have enough balls in the entertainment industry to make these kinds of jokes. But then towards that third section with the weirdos, there's some real poignancy and emotion and drama going on there that does, rebound with a little bit of comedy. But your film really does encapsulate everything about the magic of movies, from the visual possibilities to the absurdity to the ability to draw out, the whole range of emotions. I just wondered, was that something that was on the page, or you kind of mentioned you were working on this up until it was sort of done? Was that an intention, or was it something you kind of found in the edit as you went along?
I mean, I think everything. It was funny. Like I reread the scripts because like Marcus would be kind of our script. He would be kind of our like home base for the script. Sometimes Blim and I would be going off and producing a film, but sometimes we'd be like, wait, what? We have to go back to Marcus, and he'd be like, hey, structure. This is actually because like underneath the film there's a structure. It looks like chaos, but like. And it is, but like there's buried structure underneath, because otherwise it really wouldn't work at all. Like structure is everything in film, right? So to answer your question, yeah, it was on the page, but sometimes it would we would just veer off from the page. But like the core of it, like the kind of like the essence of it was kind of on the page always. But we would always veer off from that as far, like go on crazy tangents, but always try to keep it a little bit contained. But yeah, to answer your, I'm not exactly sure. Like you mean like the range of like emotions and like the range of like feelings you might get elicit from an audience. Was that like intentionally you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like as you go down these tiers from the titans, it seems kind of random at the outset, but you realize by the end of the film there's certain tiers, almost like going down through Dante's levels of hell, but almost in reverse. We were going down from more of an abstract callousness of the business down to the point where you get to the dreamers, who are the people who really come to Hollywood, who want to make something of themselves and still maintain their humanity on their way to achieving their dreams. So the Titans are, you've got your kind of movie executive Ted, who's having troubles with the young former Disney princess and her new Twilight and space movie. They get down into the weirdos, which is this one character is trying to organize basically a political get together of people of all different persuasions having a dialogue, and how hard that is. But then you get down into the dreamers, and I believe it was Anna was the character who was, she's an aspiring actress. Her grandmother, I think, had achieved some notoriety but never quite made it. And then you've got Barry, who's the personal fitness instructor, wants to open a gym. In those stories, you really get a sense of these are, people who have not yet been broken by Hollywood. They are unlike Ted, who we met at the very beginning. So you're kind of coming full circle. You see the people who've lost their humanity. That's where you start, and you end with people who still have that, even though they've been struggling. They never quite got enveloped by the beast.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the weirdo section is always like, because I mentioned earlier I'm really into doing stuff about politics. That was definitely the most fun, like for me, just because I think the Hollywood stuff I love, but like it was really fun to do the Antifa stuff. I mean, that's obviously kind of the secret of the movie, I think, of really what it ends up being kind of like about in many ways with with my character and stuff like that, of like kind of what the twist is on that. But and just like the character you mentioned, Naya, who's trying to create this like political revolution through talking, while the other character Daphne is trying to do political movement through like blowing shit up. So it's like kind of the like two-way different spectrums, right? But yeah, the Dreamer section is way more of this kind of like, like, I don't want to say it's like charming, but also like scary because it's not working for the characters, but they're like, and that's where, some of the more like influences of like Death of a Salesman come. I mentioned that earlier, but it's like where you just kind of are so, someone like Barry who's just consistent on trying to do this thing that's clearly not working, but he's just holding on to it. So yeah, it's all like, I don't think any of us had this like this hyper specific intention of like how the three kind of the timeline of the three exactly. It was more of just making sure that those three existed and that they kind of came together. I don't know. That's the best way to say it.
One thing I want to ask, I don't want to spoil who I'm talking about, so I'll just tiptoe around it. There is a framed picture that becomes very important of you and a sort of notorious political figure. I
Yes.
couldn't tell if that was real or if that was one of the best Photoshop jobs I've seen in a movie in a while.
Politicon.
So you did meet him.
Yeah.
Wow. So was that just for was
Well,
was it just like I'm working on a screenplay, in your head, and they're like, hey, can I get a picture?
Well, so I used to have these my first few films were these like anti-war docs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of like and this was like during like 2014. So there's like a lot of libertarians who are kind of jumping on the like, mostly caring about like tax policies, right? But like they would also be pretty good on, despite their horrible economic and policies, just they'd be pretty good on anti-war stuff, right? That's like one area that there's like some common ground with like the left. And so I would go to some of these conferences and stuff, and I always wondered, I was like, well, some of those people there have nothing to do with the anti-war movement, and they're more like, like anti-tax people like Grover Norquist and shit. And it was funny because I would meet them and I would be like, one day I'm kind of here. They kind of just think I was like, one day maybe I can do some sort of like Borat kind of interview thing. So when I was at Politicon, it was, I just like attended because I remember I wanted to see somebody's, I forget. But so yeah, I did see this person, and I always take the opportunity. I think I even like Ann Coulter was there, and I try to give it's like, so I always try to take the opportunity to kind of do something like that because I know with the weird stuff I make, I might need it. So I don't think there was anything, I don't think I knew, I think I was making Mondo then, and I was like, I don't know if that was the intention, but I always try to do that. And hopefully, one was, now I'm like giving the gamut away, but it's like I do want to do some sort of like maybe fake interview with one of these political figures to kind of do something goofy with. I don't know, but hopefully they're not watching this. You screwed it all up for me, man.
Well, I haven't mentioned who we're talking about specifically. Yeah,
it's all good.
I do want to talk about the Antifa stuff. That was because this film was all shot pre-pandemic. Is that right?
Oh yeah, so this was shot in like 2018. So when we were actually screening the movie in 2019 for people were like, "Hey, I don't know who these people are. I don't know what Antifa is." And so that was a big problem because it was like, you can kind of just be like, "Oh, they're communists or whatever," or like, but no, it was like really important for the audience to like know what Antifa was. So I was like, I don't know. But then by the time we fucking just with everything that happened, I mean, obviously everybody knows who Antifa is. Probably as we speak, Fox News is like freaking out, like salivating at the mouth about how like Antifa's joining the forces with Taliban or some crazy nonsense. You know what I mean? So like, I don't. So like, yeah. So when we first did it, not a lot of people knew who they were, and then just through external, political forces and all that, like it obviously is now a huge thing, so it was just funny how that worked out. Now everybody knows obviously what that is.
Because it's weird because, again, without giving much away, they don't come off well in the film. So I'm just wondering, do you know was there any kind of fear once this thing was in the can and you knew when it was going to be coming out that they might ruffle some feathers?
No, because ultimately, I don't want to give it away, but like ultimately, Daphne's like the true one, right? Because obviously, one of them is not even really Antifa,
Hmm.
and then the other guy is based off because I used to go to like Occupy LA rallies, and so that wasn't Antifa, but that was probably some like part of the origin of some of that left movement. So I remember going to some of those, and look, I mean, I think the movie's a comedy, right? So I love actors, and I love these people, and they're kind of poking fun at them. So it was never really an intent. I mean, it's a comedy, right?
Yeah.
So, but the values and the cores of like what they're actually trying to do becomes a huge important part of the movie in the third act, and the characters kind of rally around a certain character in the weirdo chapter where. So I don't know. I think if somebody fully watched the movie, they wouldn't have that perception. I think they would, unless they're very sensitive to like any kind of joke, which I guess maybe some of them are. But no, I think ultimately the movie's like it's not really throwing. At the end of the day, this is like gets into the whole thing about it, Antifa and stuff. But like at the end of the day, it's like the movie does deal with an actual like fascist, right? Like a character who's that, and ultimately it is against that character.
Yeah.
So like the splitting of the hairs of like what Antifa is and stuff like that, I don't know, but yeah, it's obviously making kind of light of maybe of like of like so like here's an example. One reason why I thought that was interesting to do was because on the news, at least now, you would think that Antifa was like a organized, like if you watch like Fox, you'd think Antifa is some like highly organized, sophisticated like organization, like all these things where it's not. It's literally it's like a movement of young people who are angry about certain things, right? So showing them in that light is kind of mitigating this irrational, crazy fear that people have of Antifa and like all that stuff. So I think that was part of the intention, but no, it definitely wasn't like to make total fun of them. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is there was like hmm, yeah, you're correct. Because of the way that whole storyline plays out, and because a character is who he is, it does make sense that they would be kind of goofy and and a little bit sad in terms of how like one of those particular meetings went. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, and I kind of touched on this, there's some of the humor in the earlier portions of the film. Some of these jokes felt like they were. This is not to say that they're dated. It's just that I haven't seen an audacity in some of this humor since like 2013. Things that people are kind of getting in trouble for now. There's a 9/11 joke that my jaw hit the floor. It was a funny joke, but again, did you have any fear of putting some of this out there? They're talking about everything from cultural and political identities to like racial identities to all that stuff, or was there any thought that we can't really say this stuff right now?
No, because like I think ultimately, I think if I'm pretty comfortable with what I think politically and like what I think about a wide span of issues where I'm not like I don't feel like I feel like some of that if it depends what kind of like what your ultimate like worldview and intentions are, right? I think that's when actually people can smell something that's a little bit wrong, right? A funny joke in the context of a movie that's to me ultimately about kind of weeding out some bad actors in town, right? Like maybe like the character in the movie, that the villain of the movie. Ultimately, I think the movie has a very positive messages about kind of working as a collective, but with amongst a lot of individuals, all these kind of things that like I can stand behind in the film as a whole. So I think as long as you stand behind the whole canvas, it's okay, to make some jokes. I think that's kind of a little bit in some weird ways overblown. I think people were like, I mean, like people are like, oh, cancel culture. You can't do anything these days. You can't go and do stand up. Like Yeah, you can. I don't
Well, I
know.
mean, there is some of that. I mean, we have seen
For
some
sure, for sure.
repercussions. It all it. I think the problem is it's very situational. You know, sometimes people can say stuff that's outrageous and no one cares, and other times, I think that it's the randomness that kind of puts people off.
Yeah, no, but I definitely was conscious of these things, and and like I think actually to go to your to some of your this might be a good like way to talk this too. Is like I think some of the older Mondo films, which maybe I don't like do service to enough, is like they really intended to do shock and like offend people, where that to me wasn't really my like interest or intention at all. Frankly, I mean, there's like people joke it's like when they see the movie, they're like, "Oh, your movie's surprisingly wholesome." You know what I mean? It's like,
I think that's
and it,
fair.
and
You
it's a
know,
detriment. It's in some ways to some people who are really into those genre films. I think they're a little bit like, oh, it's kind of almost not like crass, but like I didn't really have an interest in doing these kind of like, like I love Roger Corman and stuff, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna get like the girls and like that's when I think it kind of gets a little bit like, what is this? And I don't think that would hold up well at all. And I wouldn't really want to make that. But the stuff we're doing, I think, is a little bit more like, it's a little bit more just like poking fun at the world as opposed to trying to offend a certain group of people and being like, oh, we got away with it. You know what I mean?
yeah, and
Unless,
I
unless of course, if you're like in the alt right and you get offended, but that's like, I don't care. You know what I mean?
well, I mean that's wholesome. I think is it's an odd term to apply to this movie, but I think it works, especially
It is a weird word.
well because you look at
Wholesome cocaine use. I don't know.
but just in terms of the message of in that what I'll call the fourth act, because you've got this, it's not quite the bookend, it's not quite the three main sections, it's how the three main parts all come together and the characters come together to accomplish something. These are folks who they shouldn't really meld. You've got the the Antifa member and the studio executive working together to solve a problem, along with the shrooms dealer and other folks and the actress. But it does show that people, despite their differences and their backgrounds, they can come together to take down the villain.
Yeah, and I think one thing Blim and I would always say is like, oh, it takes a village kind of thing, right? It takes a village to take down this villain, and that was something I just always and it's like part of the reason why I play that character. I remember I think it was Blim's idea, but it was like I remember being like, who's gonna want to play this fucking character, And so it was like, oh, and like I don't know. So yeah, but that's definitely no, that's a big part of like what I can only speak for myself on the film, right? Because I everybody involved in the film, especially like Blim and Marcus, or wrote it with me, like they have, I'm sure, their own way of looking at things. But to me, I think part of the reason why what I want people to get out of it, or like if they get something out of it other than just maybe a laugh or being like, what the fuck, or what is this, is like there are these kind of like bad actors, even especially nowadays where there's like the internet is kind of like, really given an opportunity for kind of these people to really get their ideas out there. Yeah, that's like it's the end of the movie, like it's not cool. You know what I mean? Like, and no, I mean, it hits a younger audience or something like that, and like being able to take jabs at like some of those types of people, the kind of like the Ben Shapiro's of the world and stuff, like I think better for it.
Well, I do want to ask, James Cromwell is listed as an executive producer on the movie. How did you get him involved, or how was he involved?
So it kind of goes back to our original conversation, because back in 2015, I directed that movie, Imminent Threat, and I basically was reaching out. I reached out to like Oliver Stone, and he was coming out with Snowden, so he was like, I don't know if that was the reason, but that's what he said. At least he might have just not liked it, but like, but Cromwell watched it and he liked it, and he responded. His colleague responded and was like, yeah, he'd love to put his name on it. So that was years ago. So this time around, I think I might have even like annoyed him with like with some other movie, and he like they never responded. So I was like, oh, maybe I like screwed up my relationship with James Cromwell. Shit. So I didn't like reach out to him up until the very end, where I said, "Hey, I made this movie. You know, me and my friends made this movie. Would you want to put your name on it to help?" And he watched it and he was really into it. And he's been kind of like doing interviews and he's really helpful. And he's just the best. I mean, not just like a really like great, you know, Oscar nominated actor, but like he's a real activist. He's a real progressive doing really great stuff, you know? So he's just a really cool person to just be associated with, honestly. Like he's the man. Like he's a really cool dude.
Nice. Now, as far as the actual filming of the movie, when you first reached out to me, you said that you shot this for like 10 grand and on a phone. Now, is that an exaggeration?
Yeah, I mean, we've eventually obviously needed a little bit more money for like releasing the movie, you know, um like we did it, like, yeah, like publicity, you know, like the extra things later. So it
Sure.
probably ended up being a little bit more like if you included everything, which usually film budgets, you don't include a lot of the more release oriented stuff. It's mostly just the production budget. Yeah, it was like there wasn't really a crew. It was mostly Chris and I. So there wasn't like a gaffer, a best boy, or truck outside. It was just backpack, Chris, me, and then a few times we had Aaron, who played Caesar. He's a great actor, but he also is also knowledgeable about sound. So a few days he did sound, but no, it was really just backpack with sound stuff, and Blim would do it. Basically, so Blim was the production designer, and I was shooting. So that's kind of how we did it. It was just Blim and I, you know, and that's the more I think about it, the more crazy it is, because it's like, you know, you just usually you have a crew of people working on the movie, but it just wasn't that case. Yeah.
What phone did you use, or
iPhone. It
phones?
was an iPhone. I wish I had tucked it. It's iPhone 8 plus.
Wow. Because it doesn't, I don't know much about movies that are shot on phones, but I mean, it looks amazing. Down to part of that maybe because there's such a variety of locations and people and just setting your camera on interesting things. But to say that you didn't have like a full lighting rig or a sophisticated sound rig or anything, that's really surprising to me. Some of this I imagine was taken care of in post, like the different processing and effects of some of the scenes. But as far as the raw material you captured, I mean, it looked really professionally done.
Well, I think a lot of that is the collaboration of Blim and I, and Blim's ability to kind of find always different color lighting and stuff like that. So Blim was really good at that, and something that kind of was I'm not good with lighting, and so he was able to really get the kind of like red and blues and the purples and all that stuff like that in the movie, and then and so not even that much was done for color correction. So yeah, it was interesting. I always like freak out when I see, because it's like I'm so now it's like I need to have like focus, and like I just because we didn't even use lenses on it. It's literally just zoom, like just the phone. So it'll probably be disorienting for some people to kind of be like, but maybe not. Maybe so many people, especially younger people, are used to watching content on, like TikTok. So I don't know. I mean, but like it definitely feels a little bit, even when I watch it, like just like bizarre, because it's like, oh, this is a cell phone.
Yeah, but it's amazing how far the technology has come. I mean, to think that you could make this movie, you couldn't have made this movie really 10 years ago when you first when you first got out here. But
Right.
so let me ask, what's next? What are you working on? What are you up to now?
Yeah. So this is just released. I have another movie that came out like on March, I think 15th of 2020. So that was like the worst time ever for anything to come out, and that was a anthology of shorts I did. So I'm trying to kind of kind of push that again, just because it didn't, it was like really bad timing. But no, I have a movie called Hey Johnny that I'm directing. That'll be my next directing movie, because I write and produce separately from directing. But for directing, Hey Johnny, and that's kind of about this like showbiz, small time showbiz manager, and this kind of like down on his luck, like you know gambling degenerate. It's like, but it's way different. It's way more of a character piece. Like, you know, more traditional, more of a actual, more of a budget, that kind of thing. So and that's kind of what I write. I usually write much more like, I mean, I would have, some people would even say too formulaic type of stuff with the way I write screenplays. So it'll be interesting to see like doing that as opposed to something like this that was so freewheeling and stuff.
So now that you've finished, you've gotten Mondo Hollywoodland out of your system. Do you feel differently about Hollywood now than you did when you started the film?
Yeah, just because I started it so long. We started making this, Blinn, Marcus, and I, like so long ago. So it's like I wouldn't say anything really from the film, or I'm sure there is, but like, yeah, I mean, especially just the idea of like getting a feature, a lower budget feature out there, like I did with my first film, but that was a documentary. Documentaries are different, like a narrative film is just a whole different beast. So yeah, I don't even know exactly what to put my finger on with that, but yeah, I mean, it's a while. It's just that it takes a long time. Movies take forever, and that's why so many movies like, and there's so many steps, right? Because it's like you make the movie, and then you gotta actually like finish the movie, and then you have to like get the distributor, and then you actually have to like release the movie. It's a 5-year process, and it's like, and you just kind of hope it works. But like, but yeah, so I guess I learned just like, I mean, it just takes a long time, and it's pretty exhausting, but it's fun, it's like that's what it's all about, I guess, right?
So are you a Titan, a weirdo, or a dreamer, or a little bit of everything?
Well, probably a little bit of everything. But yeah, definitely a little bit of everything.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on the film. Like I said, it was a lot of fun to watch. I love the ideas. I love the execution. I love that I had no idea what I was in for, even as I was watching it, all the way up to the very end. So congratulations again. I can't wait to see what you come up with next, man. And I really appreciate you talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know, these indie films, they're, this isn't out in every theater. So I appreciate you taking the time to spend some time on a small film like this.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, good luck, and we'll catch you later.
All right, cool. Thanks, Ian.
All right. Take care.